Franklin was initially betrayed by Louis when he let Teddy out of a contract, and Franklin retaliated by going scorched earth. He pillaged her club, took her narcotics, and told Kane about her. But now that Teddy was at the center of the Saints' conflict, it was only a matter of time before bodies started to fall among their inner sanctum. Every scene of tonight's episode has a deathly undertone as everyone laments Jerome's absence. The surviving Saints start to sink after Jerome, the person who kept them all grounded in some way, dies. However, the way each member of the family proceeds is distinctively different and reflects their personal issues. The episode is aptly titled Charnel House, a structure where human skeletons are kept and a metaphor for any location overrun with the afterlife. This episode is full of charnel houses, including Wanda's desperately attempting to escape the projects, Louis and Jerome's empty house filled with mementos of their relationship, and the inside of Franklin's head, which I would call its own charnel house. To further extend the metaphor, Jerome's death represents a literal skeleton in everyone's closet, because they all feel somehow responsible for taking his life. Louis's guilt is the clearest because she wouldn't have been taken captive in the first place if it weren't for her obstinate ambition. The shot that eventually killed Jerome was brought on by his love for her. She is compelled to say an early goodbye to his body at the funeral home, leaving her bruised and raw, and she then falls into a pit of grief and irrational anger. With the exception of her children, Sissy is now the last member of her direct bloodline, and she appears to almost disassociate after her brother's death. But as the episodes go on, her fervent desire for retribution turns into righteous submission as she comes to terms with the fact that she has no control over her family's future. Her sibling was still sacrificed on the altar of Avaris despite her pleas to both Jerome and Franklin. Her son is changed into a man she occasionally hardly recognizes. Her husband and sibling are deceased, and she now has almost no one left to lose while Louis has nothing left to lose. The episode's director, Logan Kivans, visually establishes this distinction as the two women settle down to talk at Louis's house for the first time since Jerome's death. They converse while sitting across from one another at a long table, and the camera pans between both of their faces as they do so. They are both seated at the same table on the same level and expressing the same levels of shock and sorrow. However, their mental states diverge as evidenced by what we can see behind their heads. Louis sees complete darkness, while Sissy sees an open window. When Louis hears Sissy, she says, "You still have things you care about." I don't implying that Sissy still has some hope for peace, while Louis has given up and fallen into the abyss. She frantically drives to Scully's for mental support, because she can't sleep without having nightmares about the previous night. She drives erratically, smashing into garbage cans and approaching. She visits a childhood friend who lovingly tends to Louis's wounds as she soaks in the bath. They have a discussion in which they look back on their youth and discuss how Louis came to be who she is. She recalled giving a young man $20 in exchange for allowing him choke her, in order to time how long it would take someone to pass out. She makes mention of being repeatedly sexually assaulted by men in her community, sometimes in a group situation, during that same conversation. The camera switches between views of Louis alone in the frame, joined only by her reflection in the mirror next to her, and shots of the two women speaking in conversation. Louis is depicted in two different ways, as a young child who has experienced abuse, and as an adult who continues to experience abuse, but is unable to leave it behind no matter what she does. She sobs to her friend and asks why she continues returning to the same spot. Louis returning home after leaving Jerome's body at the mortuary and gazing into her mirror is another memorable cinematography scene. Louis's image is shattered because of the paneling in the mirror. This suggests that Louis is not only actually looking in the mirror at herself, but that what she is seeing is distorted. This might symbolize her distorted sense of self-worth as a result of what she's been through, or it might be the guilt she feels for her role in Jerome's death. Regardless, Louis will never be the same after this. However, she puts all of the responsibility on Franklin in public. Later, Teddy requests that Louis reveal where Franklin is. Until she can bury her husband, she instructs him to screw off, but once she has done so, she will do anything, including slit Franklin from neck to nut. Like he does with everything else, Franklin handles his sorrow on an internal level. Franklin's coping mechanisms, aside from occasional outbursts, which have increased in frequency as things get worse, entail introspection and avoidance. Franklin's silence in this episode is deafening because he has never been one to reveal his cards, either in business or with his feelings. Franklin is coping with more on the inside the calmer he is. However, trauma won't go unnoticed, no matter what we convince ourselves or how we cope. Franklin's dreams are revealing the effects of the stress. He experiences a terrible night terror and cannot breathe when he awakens until Veronique calms him down. Business as usual continues to come first for him despite the internal mental turmoil he's experiencing. He even tells Leon that Jerome is his blood and that he loves him, but that he shouldn't have split up in the first place. Even though it's obvious that guilt is consuming Franklin and Louis internally, they are both unable to acknowledge any wrongdoing. To gain access to Teddy and kill him, Franklin still needs to fulfill his part of the bargain he made with Gustavo. When Gustavo discloses what has been going on with the KGB and DEA, he runs into yet another obstacle. He begs Leon for $500,000 to help give Gustavo the funds. Gustavo received a visit from Ruben, who issued an ultimatum. Either assist him set up Teddy with the shipment arriving in 2 days, or risk making the KGB your enemy. When the deal is done, he offers to help Gustavo escape, but this isn't enough for Ixamora, who is at her wit's end trying to deal with everything. And she suggests that it might be best if he stays in the dark about where she and the boys end up. He sets out all the details for Franklin as they're both forced into a corner, and realize that the only way out is to get rid of Teddy, but they must act quickly. The episode ends with Jerome's funeral, where we see the locals paying their respects. I even saw a cameo from Nico Annan, who you may recall from Season 2 as Laurent de Laurent, one of the hosts at Claudia's nightclub. Franklin's mental blockage is evident. He is still dressed in all black, looking like death personified, and he is wearing a pair of sunglasses that are 100% opaque, refusing to even look at what is taking place in front of him. The Saint Ladies exchange a longing glance between Sissy and Louis. Leon and Dion make a promise to murder Kane to exact revenge on Jerome as everyone departs. Louis confronts Franklin after the ceremony and queries him as to why he came back to save her while she was with Kane. He acknowledges that he is acting in a gentlemanly manner, but reveals that the main motivation is that he requires her to keep the commitment she made while facing death. She must lend a hand to him. Louis is obviously not having this. He is asked if he is aware that he is the demon. It feels like the final battle in this conflict is about to start. Franklin responds, "Yeah, I know." I worry if Julia will actually snitch to put an end to everything after seeing how she interacted with Teddy and learning that she is expecting a child. The government would actually benefit from this, as we saw that Teddy's superiors are prepared to have someone blamed for this mission's failure. His unwillingness to give up when he's ahead and obsession with patriotism may prove to be his undoing. By the conclusion of the season, I hope Wanda is secure and unharmed. We saw Leon return to his former neighborhood and way of life through the transformation of his hair, and now we see Wanda settle back into her home and get a new hairstyle that is more typical of Black America. She trades her braids for a perfectly straight bob with a center part. She appeared to have no problem returning to the United States, but I applaud her for leaving the projects and moving out. Leon should follow her, I trust. Regarding Louis' torture's intensity, I encountered some resistance. I concur that other scenes, such as Lenny's rape or Manboy beating Wanda, were graphic as well, but they were very distinct given the context and history of sexual violence against Black women, as well as the particular forms of torture they illustrated. This scene goes much deeper than anything we've seen before by fusing the nearly committed gang rape with the beatings, branding, and conversation. And Louis did that on purpose because she didn't want to find herself back there. The main offender in Snowfall received the harshest punishment.